No, no problem. This is totally fine.
So, Nivedita, last time we were telling you a few things about Mizoram,
Yes.
and I have a few points to make before we leave that issue.
Okay.
Uh, the point is that when we are doing counterinsurgency, there is need to have a feeling for the local people.
Right.
Many of our administrative officials who come from the government and also many of the military people who go there think of insurgents as the enemy. Since they are members of our country, you cannot think of them as enemy. One had to explain to many young officers and their commanding officers to explain to them when they come from all over the country that terrorism or insurgency could start anywhere in our country. It could be in Punjab, it could be in South India, it could be in Central India. We never know when it can start. And therefore, it could be in their own hometowns. So therefore, one has to mentally think of these people as your very own.
Right.
And therefore, when you deal with them, you have to deal with them with concern for their welfare and also let them clearly know that you have love and affection for that group of people. And yet, if they break the law, then you're going to go for them. In other words, you need hearts and minds plus the danda. The danda is that if you break the law, we'll go for you.
Right.
And that is something that has to be understood by everybody. Now, in the Western world, they don't know much about the business of terrorism. They haven't experienced it. And many Americans and British people and officials used to come and talk to me and say, look, you Indians don't know how to have hearts and minds and things. We said, well, you people don't know what terrorism is.
Yeah.
The type of terrorism that Pakistan has started, for example, where you can get into people's homes and threaten their families and all that. You can get into the homes of judges and officials of the court, so that you never have a single case in India of an insurgent or a terrorism being brought to book.
Right.
Because families of the judges, etc., are threatened. One has to understand the situation. Therefore, to deal with such situations, you do need laws which go beyond the normal to allow the security forces to function. But at the same time, the security forces have to be trained to not get angry and not to get a feeling of enmity, despite the fact that some of them might get wounded and killed. That's the first point. I find that many of the civil administration, both in these territories as well as our own, are quite corrupt. I thought maybe we've been slaves for 1,000 years and that is the way we think. Slaves, because there was the slave emperor Muslim rule first, then there was the Mughal rule, then there was the British rule. It's almost 1,000 years. Now, when you have a slave mentality, then you want to make money out of the state whenever you can. And political leaders, etc., are more concerned with winning an election and getting their seat rather than doing governance. There's a difference between the two. I don't think anywhere in the world people have much respect for their politicians, but nevertheless, this is required. Now, who becomes a politician? For example, in our country, I would say that maybe 40% or 50% are criminals of the people who are MPs and MLAs. They have cases against them of murder, rape, you name it. But for the criminal mind, the best method of saving themselves from legal and police action is to become a politician. Then when you garner votes, many cases in our deep villages and distant areas are threatened by criminal gangs to vote in a certain way, ensuring a vote for themselves or for the people who support them. So this is something that we need to keep in mind. Anyway, that's how it is, and this is a situation. I'm sure that as we go on, we're only 75 years of independence. We learn every year, and I'm sure that eventually we'll get over this particular problem. Now, you recollect that I was my commander there in Mizoram was a chap called Major General RCV
Yeah.
Update from the artillery.
Right.
And towards the end of my tenure in Mizoram, he got posted out. He had done his 2 years in the East, and so he got posted out. And the new man who came as a Major General was a person called Sushil Kumar. Now, Sushil Kumar is an infantry officer. He had joined the infantry as a Jawan. And then he did his various examinations, got promoted to an officer, and he became a Major General to command this particular division. And I found him an excellent person because he had been a Jawan and knew how to manage troops since he'd been one himself. And though everybody said that, the infantry doesn't have much love for the armored corps and they may not treat you all that well, I thought that he was a far superior commander than his predecessor. When he came to Mizoram, he was greatly appreciative of the work that had been done there. He came and visited some of my posts and was duly impressed. And I think it was the better for that organization at that stage of time to have had a very good commander. Also, I think when the army commander was Naveen Rawley, he got changed. And as I told you last time, General J.F.R. Jacob took over. He was also a very good army commander and good for that area. Now, all these factors have a bearing on whether you can bring a state out of insurgency back to the normal form of being a state in our country. And Mizoram was only a union territory at that time. In due course of time, they did make it a state. And I told you last time, one of the few examples of the world where a whole state and an area in deep jungles of bamboo, which was antagonistic to the Union of India, became a very loyal subject state of our country. I'd gone on leave from Mizoram, and I'd come away for about a month. This is in early 1975. And while I was in J&K, because my wife was from Jammu, and we went for a holiday to Kashmir. So we were walking around the mountains of Kashmir with the family, enjoying ourselves, when I got my posting orders to go out of Mizoram and report to Jaipur to take over the command of 4 independent armored brigades. Now, this 4 independent armored brigade was under Southern Command, which is in Pune of the army. And it was located in Jaipur. And it is a prize posting. I did want to go back to Mizoram because I wanted to say goodbye to my troops and to many friends that I had made in Mizoram. So I sent a request to my elder brother, who was posted in Delhi, to see if he could talk to the MS branch and see if I could delay my posting for a bit. But this didn't work out because
Bless you.
the chap who was in charge of MS branch was a Lieutenant General Kundad Singh from Rajasthan.
Yeah.
And he said, it's very funny to my brother. If we are trying to do something for this young man, he wants to go back to the old place because this is a prize posting in Jaipur, and if he doesn't report there at this time and date specified, that's within the next few days, this will go to somebody else. So, okay, I didn't go back to Mizoram, and I reported to Jaipur as the commander of the 4 Armored Brigade. Now, I must tell you here that it is not normal for an officer to have the time to command 2 separate brigades because your promotion things come in line. But since I was a superseded officer, as I explained last time, well, it takes time because you are now behind your colleagues by a year or two. And though my colleagues were sweating to become major generals, I was still a brigadier and I had more time. So therefore, I got the opportunity to command the 2nd Armored Brigade. This greatly improves your experience. And as we say in the army, instead of going the straight line of promotion upwards, you go in a diverse method of commanding various organizations before you get promoted. So your experience is superior. I'll tell you a few things about before I leave Mizoram, about the culture of the place. We must understand our tribals. I've told you a fair amount about Nagaland since I was there as a captain. And now about Mizoram, they are separate, they're a single group. The Nagas are about 7 or 8 separate tribes. Mizos are a single tribe. And as I told you at my time, there were only about 3.5 lakh population, so they knew each other. Every family is distantly related. But in the tribal culture, similar things happen as in Meghalaya, for instance, and in Mizoram, and in Nagaland, and for that matter, in certain areas of Arunachal. And it's interesting for us to understand what the tribal culture is. Firstly, let's talk about the aspect of boy and girl. The girl has a free occasion to do whatever she likes.
Okay.
She can make as many boyfriends as she likes, she do what she pleases. But she is in control. Women there in the tribal culture are very important people because they run everything. Because the men have to be left aside to fight battles with the next village, and Mizos were headhunters. So they wanted to go and attack some other village and cut off somebody's head and all that and come back. So since the men have to be ready to fight or ready to defend all the time, it's the same in Nagaland. Everything is done by the women. They are the ones who make a home. They are the ones who do the cropping. They're the ones who cut the jungle for jhuming. And they're the ones who plant the rice. And they're the ones who, with some assistance, reap the crops. They're the ones who clean the house. They're the ones who bear children. They educate the children and ensure that they get into jobs. It's all done by the woman. Therefore, for a man who does nothing except fight, it's a very great step forward in his life. And let us say a very uplift in his career if he can get a good woman to marry. Therefore, he has to pay the bride price. It's not a dowry where in our society people want to get rid of their daughters and they pay a dowry to the man. They want the girl, you have to pay a lot of money for it. So this fellow approaches the parents and they even discuss what is the price. There is no social deviation of caste and creed there. Whether a person is poor or rich, they're of the same social standing. Therefore, nobody bothers who the person is. What they are bothered is that how much price can he pay for the girl, and also whether she is agreeable to marry him or not. So he has to pay. If he's got the money, he pays so much in so many mithuns or so many pigs or whatever. These are all costly items. If he hasn't got the money, he can be a slave, work in a family like a servant for 6 months, maybe a year, to pay the bride price, and then the parents agree that the lady can get married to him. Since the lady practices free love anyway before getting married, she can do what she likes. Yeah. And she is the final arbiter of whether she wants to marry this chap or not. So as I said, it's a very great step forward in a person's life in tribes to get a woman to get married. Now, here are troops from UP and Punjab and Rajasthan and especially Haryana, if I might say. They can't understand. Yeah. There was a case, for instance, in a distant post in northeast Mizoram. where a Jawan of the UPPAC was on guard duty next to his picket. And one day, this pretty little girl was passing by, and he held her hand. So she immediately screamed and made a big noise. The system of law there is that the whole village council gets together. There's a village council president in each village, and they decide the issue. They decided that this man tried to catch her hand in order to rape her. So they passed strictures against the army, and this went up to the government in Mysore and published in all the papers. Now my orders here was that nobody amongst my men in the brigade would be allowed to touch any Mizo girl. All right. And I said, if you do, then no matter what distant post you're in, I mean, sometimes this particular post was 3 days march from Mysore. I said, the commanding officer will march to my headquarters with this man for me to give him the disciplinary action. So the case came to me, and I ordered the commanding officer, and he was a young UPPAC police officer, not very experienced. He was wearing a lieutenant colonel's rank, but I don't think he was age-wise more than a young captain. So he came after 4 or 5 days with this man, and they were summoned to my office for me to find out why this Jawan had acted like this and why the orders in the battalion were not sufficiently clear to prevent this guard fellow to hold her hand. So I asked this man, why did you catch her hand? So he said in his Jat language, which I can't repeat here because, Jat language is not easy to understand at the best of times. Say, but I saw this girl every day moving in front of the picket. Sometimes she's with this man, sometimes she's with that man, and sometimes with the flowing man. And she's an attractive woman, and I haven't seen a woman for the last 1 or 2 years. So when she passed by the picket, I held her hand. I thought maybe I also have a chance. She started screaming. I had no other intention.
Oh my God.
I said, if she goes with so many people, maybe she'll accept me also catching her hand. So I said, you're not supposed to do that. He said, well, we don't know the culture of this place, but there it is. Just the way I felt. And I'm very sorry about that, but that's it. So I said, all right. I told the commanding officer, I said, post him back to UP. So they have, the UPPAC has other units inside UP itself. So I said, immediately the man will be posted back to his headquarters in UP, which was done within the next 2 days. And I got very good press reports on that. They said that the culprit who tried to rape our girl in such and such village was caught by the brigade commander, banished from Mizoram.
Oh.
That chap was, of course, very happy to get back home, back to his girlfriend and wife and so on. And that was it. It's just an example as to what goes. There's one more case where, for instance, we had a must-be Sikh battalion. I've told you about must-be Sikhs. They are the very big, dark-colored Sardars from southern Punjab. One of the battalions came and they were in southern Mizoram at a place called Longtala. And the commanding officer was a very good mountaineer. He was an Everester, very famous man. And he was a lieutenant colonel commanding them. And, we have, because since our pickets are all on hilltops and ridgelands, we give money for porters and ponies to be hired. Because, rations and water, everything comes along the road at the bottom of the picket. And then you hire local people. They get paid to bring ponies and to bring porters to carry this stuff up to the pickets. Every day the picket wants water. Water is only available in the streams, which are much lower down, sometimes 3,000 feet lower than the picket, or 4,000 feet. So you pay porters and ponies to bring the stuff up. So the troops are relieved for patrolling. I noticed in the account system of the payments that we make for porters and ponies to every unit, that this battalion had not used this fund at all. So there were a couple of lakhs of rupees lying in credit because this battalion had not utilized the funds. So I decided to visit them. I visited them and I got into discussion with the commanding officer. Why have you made no arrangements for partisan ponies, which is authorized by the government? He said, Brigadier, these are must-be troops.
Okay.
And you have given orders that they shouldn't touch a local guard. But must-be's are must-be's. Nobody can control them. They're criminal tribes. So I have to make them come down those 3 or 4,000 feet, take their own water and bring their own rations and hump it up back to the pickets and keep them busy from morning till night so that they're so dead tired that they go to sleep. And with the result, I've had no disciplinary case as far as women are concerned.
Oh my.
So I had to pardon them for that and said, well, I won't intervene in this because he knows his troops as he's the commanding officer. And that's the way he thought of keeping them disciplined and keeping their hands to themselves. Well, we had to accept that. This is just one of the examples of the culture of this place. Now, what happens is that when troops and police people are posted in these distant areas for a number of years, I mean, the posting would be at least for 2 years or 3 years. They do get leave, annual leave, but depending on the operational scene, you can't give the full leave sometimes. A man may get a month in a year or a few weeks in a year, and there are very few people who get their full entitlement of 2 months in a year.
Right.
With the result that they don't see any of their own women. And with the result, local women look prettier and prettier every day and more attractive as the months go by. This is human nature. I did put up cases to my superiors in Eastern Army to say that we should allow wives and families to come here with men as well as officers. There are 2-3 advantages here. Your relations with the local people improve if you've got your own lady there, because if you want to go and meet somebody, they're very suspicious if you're coming alone, because they've got girls in the house and wives and so on, and they think that you soldiers are only looking for certain comforts of that nature. Whereas if you've got your own wife and your own children and so on, they do believe that you are okay because you're there, and therefore the relationships are much better. But the government wouldn't agree to this because they said this is an operational area and somebody might get shot up, and we don't want people to be shot up. I did try to explain to them that the tribals are not people who take it out on women or children. They are very stern in this. They go for the troops themselves because that's when they are. And I must say that if they find that amongst the troops there's a Jawan or an officer who's got an eye for the local ladies, they ambush him and try and kill him at every opportunity. I saw that in Nagaland also. If the commander or the troops are behaving correctly, then, the relationship is much better, even with the underground. Anyway, I don't know what the situation now is because peace has returned there. I'm sure families come there. But the point here is that you may go to an operational area where maybe your allowances are a little better because you don't have your family. But I think that when you're dealing with tribal groups, etc., there's a great advantage in having your families present, because then the local people don't suspect you and relationships can improve much quicker. These are some of the areas. I think India has done quite well with its tribal areas. I don't know if I told you earlier that these areas, Nagaland, Mizoram, and parts of Arunachal Pradesh, only the the padris, the Christian missionaries, used to go there earlier and join them with their families and assist them. And they told all these people that you don't belong to India, you're a separate group of very high quality people. That is why the insurgency started, because they wanted to be separate. So many of the states officially banned further missionary activity come to this area. This was maybe the tribals would prefer that those missionaries are allowed to come. In Mizoram, when I was asked, I said certainly they can come. And there was an old missionary lady who came from Ireland. She must have been in her 70s and 80s. She traveled all the way because they knew her very well. She spent many years with her husband there. And so I found that they were, since she had started Christmas, I mean, she started churches there and started choirs. I'm very fond of music myself. So I let it be known to the authorities that I'd like to attend some of the functions for this lady. And they had at that time a choir competition between number of churches in Mizoram. Now this competition is such that each church produces its choir. The choir comprises girls and boys and has all shades of music available. They don't have any organs. All they have is a guitar. But these choirs are trained to sing without music. And what happens is that the conductor of the choir, he has a penny whistle. You know what a penny whistle is?
Yeah.
It's 4 little tubes which give 4 separate notes so that you can tune a piano or a guitar according to that sound.
Yeah.
So this fellow comes and blows the note on which a particular psalm or hymn has to be sung. And then he conducts the whole choir. And when the choir is playing, there may be about 40 boys and girls in a choir. And they have all the voices, the sopranos in front and the altos and the basses at the back, you see. And they sing the hymn extremely beautifully with no musical accompaniment. And when they are singing, since there are 40 voices, all in coordination, and you do not feel the lack of an organ or something else giving accompaniment music. So I attended the finals. The finals were between 4 churches, and I attended all those finals, which this lady was judging. And I couldn't, for the life of me, make out which was better or worse. But she immediately, after the choir was sung, she said, "This is number 1, this is number 2, this is number 3, this is number 4," and their prizes were distributed. Their choirs compare easily. I mean, I've been to England earlier and heard the Welsh choirs, which are very famous because they've got very good voices. I think our muso choirs are very superior. And if you want to hear these, many times you find a northeastern group singing Christmas carols or something. They tour all over India and all over the world, in fact. You can hear them. And it's an excellent music. So this is something that the missionaries have left behind, which is very complimentary for all of us. So much for Mizoram. Now, I reported back to Jaipur. Since I didn't know whether there any accommodation available or what was the situation there, I traveled alone from Kashmir. My wife and children went back to Jammu. And I landed up in Jaipur, 1975, about the middle of 75. And I'll tell you about a few things about this armored brigade. This armored brigade is located in Jaipur for desert operations. It's quite a change from the thick jungles and foliage of bamboo, etc., of the northeast to the wide open deserts of Rajasthan. Though we were located in Jaipur, the operational requirement was to go beyond Jaisalmer into the Thar desert area, where we have a border with Pakistan, with the desert in between. So that means that this brigade has to be trained. The first thing I found there that all the tanks and all the vehicles were painted khaki with a disruptive pattern, because that is you're not olive green like the rest of the army. And the uniforms, instead of being olive green, are khaki, because that is what camouflages properly in the desert. But every Joan and officer was required in Jaipur, in my armored brigade, to have one set of olive green uniform also meant. I raised the first question. I said, why do we have to have one set of olive green? And the answer that was given to me was this, that every year there are very serious riots in Ahmedabad, which is the capital of Gujarat. These riots are between Hindus and Sikhs, Hindus and Muslims. They are every year. Every year there is a Rath Yatra, the Jagannath Rath Yatra, the main procession is in Orissa. But all over this country, we have Jagannath temples, and so there are minor processions in each of these towns. So in Mizoram, or rather in Jaipur, and since our brigade was responsible for the Rajasthan area, there was a requirement for the military to put on olive green uniforms to try and control these riots in Ahmedabad every Rath Yatra time. Because when the riots take place, everybody is hounding and killing each other. I'll explain this in more detail to you shortly. The police comes to try and control it, but since the police is wearing khaki uniforms, the people don't listen to them. Because they know that the police is functioning in accordance with the desires of the political leadership, that's the chief minister and his ministers inside the state, who are not trusted. So nobody lays down their arms and weapons, they keep having pot shots at each other. Got to call in the army. Then the army has to put on their olive green uniform, despite being a desert army, which wears khaki. Put on your olive green uniform, otherwise they think you're police and they don't listen. But if you put on your olive green, everybody down stools and there is peace. We don't have to fire anything. We just arrive and tell everybody, look here, army is here. Everybody lays down weapons. Now about the Rath Yatra. What happens is that the chief ministers were mostly Congress in those days. I'm talking of 1975, 76, and 77, when I was in command, are unable to control the public, especially the riotous public. What happens is there are certain areas in Jaipur where the Muslims are in majority, and there is the procession of the Rath Yatra is organized to go into the Muslim areas. Now, this is because the Muslims are very good at filigree work, marble work, jewelry. The fingers have the art of producing very beautiful items, whether it's in marble or wood or whether it's in jewelry. So they get all the trade. The Hindus are gnashing their teeth because they can't compare with that quality. Where the Muslims produce very good stuff at half the price. The Hindus don't produce very good stuff at double the price. So there is this economic disparity, and the Hindu procession demand to be taken to the Muslim area where they can sort of taunt the Muslim, burn their shops or something so that they get the trade. So what the Muslims do, they are no less, they take brickbats and stones and hot oil or something, they go on top of the roofs, multi-storied buildings. And when these processions come, the procession is taunting them, and those guys are taunting them and throwing stones at them from the top. And then these at the bottom set it on fire, the Muslim shops. So the Muslims become refugees and go here 2-3 months. They're put in refugee camps till the peace is restored. Then the Muslims come back. Now, this is a yearly function, every year without fail. Take you back. I had retired by then, 2002 maybe, when Narendra Modi first became the chief minister of Gujarat. You recollect a lot of brickbats were thrown at him for having not controlled the riots in Ahmedabad. There was a double riot at that time. One was that the Ram Mandir was to be constructed by Advani's so-called Rath Yatra in Ayodhya. And many of the Hindu pilgrims had to carry a brick to construct the mandir from all over the country. So many of these pilgrims would carry bricks with Ram written on it, get into the train, and you recollect that this train left the Ahmedabad railway station. It was halted at a signal where there was a Muslim area, and the whole compartment was burnt, carrying about 76 or 80 Hindu pilgrims who were all burnt to death. So the police came out to try and control the situation, But then Hindu crowds came out and started killing the Muslims. This is how the riots start. So these are the two occasions. At that time, there was a Rath Yatra also taking place. So these riots take place. It takes about 2-3 days to control these. The chief minister tries, whoever the chief minister, his own methods of police, etc. When that doesn't work, then the army is got. This happens every year. More about it when I became the chief as to how I tried to control this. This is what I call dirty politics. The politics here is that the chief minister wants votes and the majority is the Hindu. So he has to satisfy the greed of the Hindus at that stage. And many of the gundas of the town of Ahmedabad are recruited into special task force police forces. So he had raised special task force, 2 battalions of all the gundas to give them some salary and pay and make them into police people. But they had no training, they had nothing. They were supposed to control the riots, but they never did. And with the result, the army had to be called out, and we had to therefore have one olive green uniform, despite the fact that we were desert army wearing khaki. This is something about uniforms I wanted to inform you. I had in Jaipur my headquarters and one tank regiment, which initially was my own 66 armored regiment, but they left within a few months, and 65 armored regiment came there, which had been raised together with us in Ahmednagar. I knew them all. And we were both raised in 1966. So we had 65 armored regiment. The regimental commander was a chap called Channi Bhuller. And we had an infantry battalion on a mechanized infantry battalion. That means they had armored personnel carriers. They had the Topaz APC brought from Soviet Union at that time, which carried about 18 people. It was able to go through water and swim. And so this battalion had these APCs. That I had in Jaipur with my headquarters. Then the tank regiment in Ahmedabad was the 9 Deccan Horse, and they were under my command. So I used to visit them. And I had another tank regiment in Jodhpur, the 8th Cavalry at that time, whom I used to visit. So these are the 3 tank regiments and one infantry battalion mechanized under my command.